Hey, it's time to address a false narrative that I think is absolutely killing Generation Z, millennials, and other young adults entering the housing market or folks that want to enter the housing market. And that narrative, in my opinion, is a false narrative centered around excuses about why they can't find or afford their first property and why they can't get into real estate. And the excuses I hear range anywhere from they blame institutional investors, they blame Airbnb landlords, they blame the Federal Reserve, they'll blame property taxes, insurance, and anybody else they can get their hands on. They want to blame except themselves. And they often say, well, once the greed, corruption, and fraud are washed out of the system, once the speculation in the real estate market ends, that's when I'll get mine and I'll finally be able to afford a house. Well, folks, I'm here to tell you that is complete BS because in today's market, if you want to buy a home, there are ways to do it. You just need to think differently than maybe what you've been taught already or what you hear from the pundits. So today I've got Raymond from Raymond Thoughts and Mind here with me on YouTube on my channel. Raymond has an awesome YouTube channel. You got to check it out. The link's in my description below. But Raymond is a relatively new real estate investor, if I can call him that. And he bought the home, quite frankly, when a lot of people were running away from the housing market in a really tough time to buy a house. He did anyway. And he's going to take us through how he bought his first property, some of the struggles, some of the success he's had, and he's going to help me walk through why this narrative's out there, this false narrative about why people can't find a home, and also some solutions as to what they can do to actually enter the housing market and overcome those excuses. So, with that said, Raymond, thanks for joining me this afternoon. I'm excited to have you on our channel.
Thank you for having me, Jason.
Yeah, so take us through, like, just quickly, talk to us about your experience in the housing market and kind of what your challenges were and how you overcame them.
So, some context and background about me. My father's a contractor. I grew up mud and drywall, hanging drywall, and building custom homes, commercial upfits, tenant refits, and that sort of thing, medical, that sort of thing, in interior contracting. So I know how to sling some mud, drive a nail, frame up a wall. So that just contextualizes my experience. In 2022, I was living with my parents after some personal struggles, and I'll be honest, with uh, getting sober and getting healthy. Relocated back home in my early 30s, had a bunch of debt and no money to my name. Luckily, was still working remote at the time. Spent about a year, 8 months total, paying off the debt and then saving up some money. I had a pretty lucrative contract gig at the time, web development, and I stacked up some cash for a down payment. Now, in 2022, my credit was pretty ripped up. It was in the low 600s, and even FHA wouldn't touch me because I was 1099 contracting at the time. They couldn't do proof of income. So I also ran into an issue when I went out and tried to find a rental. No, none of the landlords in the Miami-County area in Ohio, which is a rural small town area, population totaling a little over 100,000 for the entire county. I had trouble proving my income to the landlords, and they didn't believe me when I said I made what I was making per month. I literally had an entire year's worth of the rent in the bank, and they wouldn't even show me the apartment. So I was between a rock and a hard place, and I really felt defeated. There was some pretty dark days back then because I was new to sobriety, to be honest with you, and I was still trying to get on my feet after a decade of living a different life than I wanted to live. So I had to rethink renting, homeownership, redefine it for myself. I realized that really all it is for an individual, especially a single guy like myself, I don't have any kids, I don't really date. I needed to figure out how to get myself housed because living at home in your early 30s, it wasn't going to work out long term. So I had 30 grand in the bank because I wanted to put a down payment on a nice 3-bed, 1 bath ranch locally that was about $150,000 at the time. And yes, that was the pricing in 2022, even for Miami County, a nice 1,200 square foot, 3-bed, 1-bath ranch style home. But I couldn't get the financing because I couldn't prove my income. So I was sitting on $30,000 cash. I started looking at different types of listings, some auctions, some foreclosure auctions. I wanted to try to make some bids on some foreclosures, but then the title search process and just the way the transaction was going to have to go, and most of these were occupied by the person that was getting kicked out. So I didn't want to have to actually do an eviction or anything like that. And I didn't have the business acumen and wherewithal that I have now at the time. So I found a listing on Zillow that was $59,000, and it was an old rental. It was a 3-bed, 2-bath, 2-story house on I think it's a 0.05 of an acre of a lot in the historic district of the town that I bought it in. It had no yard, is the point. The entirety of the lot is literally 3 feet on each side, and the south side of the house, I think, is only 1.5 feet to the next property. So couldn't even be built today. The oldest date I found on the county maps in the Library of Congress was 1848, had the house on the town map for that location. And it had fallen into disrepair. Not well maintained as a rental, carpet, ugly, just a very used up house, 1,600 square feet. Didn't even have a kitchen. It just had like a slop sink and a fridge in the back porch room area. So knowing what I knew about my upbringing and knowing that I could renovate this if I really put my mind to it, I went ahead and made a cash offer. They wanted $59,000. I offered her $29,000, and she took it. The lady that owned it, and all in, the house purchase price with closing ended up being $29,650. I closed in 2 weeks, and I had the stinkiest, dustiest, dirtiest old house with the biggest gas boiler furnace in the basement. It was a wreck. And I moved in a month later. I pulled the carpet and basically washed everything as much as I could. I got the smoke and, for the most part, the dirty dog hair out of it. And I moved in and basically slept on a couch and proceeded to live in and renovate the property over the next year and a half. I finished, and this was knocking 6.5 tons of plaster out. This was rewiring the entire thing, running new plumbing, correcting the north side of the house. It had a lean to it and a foundation issue where it needed to be raised 2 inches. Foundation secured, posts, support put in, and then the actual exterior wall, we had to bring that over 6 inches. So we actually poured dead men in the basement, 3,000 pounds of concrete, and used cantilevers and come-alongs to chain wench that side of the building over once all the plaster was out of that side of the house. Again, I was living in it while I was doing this. So I would basically tape off one room, do the demo, and then move on to the next room until I had basically everything down to the lat boards and the studs. Proceeded to rehang everything and it took a year and a half. And I hired 2 things out on the house, one being the roof. I hired a crew to do the roof earlier this year, March 2024. And I hired some contractor friends of mine to do the electrical. So it was about $9,000 to run the electric and $12,000 to put a new roof on it. I actually did the first story porch roof in the back. I did that myself, and I just put metal on top, and it cost like $600 in materials. $2,000 total with all the extraneous stuff that I bought for that project. But all told, it was just over 52,000 in 53,000, something like that, and a year and a half of my time. So journeyman level, finisher, drywall hanger, that sort of thing. Basically, what I mean by that is I can walk onto any GC's job site and get $25 an hour to sling mud. And that's 10 years old numbers. I could probably get $35 an hour now. But suffice it to say, I did all the work myself, hired 2 things out, spent a year and a half doing it, and I had a renovated house while I was living in it by April, May of this year, 2024. Now, I understand that my circumstances were very particular, very specified, like very special. Not everybody has the construction upbringing that I had. And quite frankly, not everybody going into first time homeownership has $30,000 in cash lying around either. I took a lemon and turned it into lemonade, and it wasn't perfect. It wasn't a perfect renovation, and it was pretty much, it was tough living there. I mean, it was a lot of blood, literally blood, sweat, and tears, living there and working on it. And so much so that I actually bought another house this past May and moved into it, the one I'm sitting in right now. And I did do that one with a mortgage because in that time I did clean up my credit and get myself to a place where I could qualify for a loan with my business income. And here I sit in one that basically, it was another old home that nobody wanted, that sat on the market for 6 months. That's also key. It sat on the market. Both properties sat on the market for 6 months. Um, and I basically just put in pergo floors, painted, and called it good with this house. And I've been very happy here. It's a half-acre lot outside of town, unincorporated. That also allowed me to get out of that house, finish it up, button it up. I put it up for sale earlier this year, and that's when I realized the housing market had completely turned. Nobody was interested. I think that quite frankly, I think that the fear of missing out, the FOMO, and the I need to get a house, that sort of desire has kind of left the normie conformies, if you will. You're not seeing it on social media much anymore. The Airbnb craze seems to have died down, and that idea that, the people, basically the point I'm trying to make is the people that wanted to buy houses already have, and the ones that didn't, they went out and used their down payment on a new Jeep Gladiator and they're renting instead. So that's actually, I saw 3 Jeep Gladiators show up in my rental neighborhood before I moved.
Wow. So let me ask you, like, when you think about, and that's a great story. It's definitely unique. You're right. Not everybody has 30 grand to drop, like you did. But I think one of the more important factors in you finding that house and being able to buy it and do what you did was, sounds like you didn't really let anything stop you. Like you were like, well, this house is, everybody's looking at maybe some newer houses that are move-in ready. I'm going to go the other side and look at something that is dilapidated, and I'm going to negotiate with the owner. It sounds like, and if I remember right, because we did a video earlier, but I'm trying to refresh my memory, you didn't use an agent, right? And so, and I could be wrong there, but it just seems like you were willing to do things that others weren't willing to do. And when I hear the narrative of, well, there's all this greed and corruption and fraud in the marketplace, and because of that, I can't buy. I don't look at those folks as like serious buyers, because if you really want something, you can figure out a way to get it. And it doesn't mean you have to buy the top of the line item. You don't have to buy a move-in ready house with granite counters and a 2-car garage with 4 bedrooms and a media room. You can buy a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom house, 1 bath, and live in it for a long time, and be happy there and be successful. So, do you think the fact that you were just willing to do anything you could to get the house, that was one of the factors of your success?
I was between a rock and a hard place, and anybody who battled with substance abuse issues and gotten sober, they know what that feels like. I didn't have a choice. You either do it or you don't, period. And that kind of sentiment, that resolve that kind of seeps into you and it steels you against the naysayers and negativity that might be in your life. Now, another part about my life is I don't really have a social circle. I had to relocate. I had to completely start over, basically. So it's just me. If you're in a couple situation or you have a significant other, it's going to be tough to do something like I did. But I looked at my option of, I'm going to end up at my parents' place until I'm in my 40s, which was not an option, or I'm going to end up renting a crap hole for $1,500 a month. Now I own the house that I'm renting for $1,500 a month, and it's not a crap hole anymore. So it was do or die. It was, and that sounds cliche, and in a way, cliches are true because they are. I didn't have a choice. When I bought it, when I made the offer, I went to contract, I bought it. Every step along the way, I kept thinking, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And it's like, no, you signed on the dotted line. You took responsibility. You committed yourself to either overcoming this situation and blasting through it or failing. And it's funny because I remember a very specific moment when I was doing the demo on the staircase, which is a 24-foot lid from the first floor to the top, to the second story lid. taking all that plaster out with a 30-foot painting ladder, basically the 25-foot painting ladder inside with a hammer and basically a respirator on, goggles, just covered in dirt and dust, and a 2-foot pile of plaster debris on this stairwell that was falling away from that demising wall, by the way. I actually had to structurally reattach that stairwell and make it sound. And I realized that I put all that weight on it while it was basically just hanging in the breeze. Not the safest, but I remember sitting at the top of that stairwell and realizing that the bathroom that had the working was upstairs, and where I sleep and keep all my clothing was downstairs. And there wasn't a choice. I had to clear this out today, and it was like 6 o'clock on a Sunday when I was there, and I was hot and sweaty and just dying. I didn't have a choice. I had to put it in 50-gallon contractor bags, which you can only fill up about a third of the way because the weight just gets too heavy, and put it in my truck and clear out and clean out and sweep out that stairwell. I remember that moment viscerally because it was the moment that I realized I am going to finish this house. Because if I don't finish this house, not to be dramatic, but it's either I finish this house or I failed. It's do or die. Like this house is now an extension of me, and maybe that's where I had to get to be able to finish it as a one-man machine. But I remember very specifically being there, and I've used that resolve in many, many other areas of my life, and building the YouTube channel that I've built in such a short amount of time now, and some other things I've done in my business, and some other financial successes I've also had. Even finding this property, a very specific property that I fought and really made a lot of sacrifices to be able to get into, even though I have a mortgage on it. But it'll readily be paid off with the payments I'm making with my rental income.
Yeah, that resolve you talk about is, I think there's a lot of young people that I deal with as a realtor that have that resolve. It seems like, but for some reason, there's a limit to the resolve when it comes to buying property. They, like you said, they drive a Jeep Gladiator or a new Pathfinder or something. But what's
Boy, those
odd
aren't
to me, what's that?
those aren't cheap. Nissan used to
No,
be. Nissans are not cheap anymore. I
no,
wanted to buy a new car because I drive a 2003 Pontiac Vibe, and it just turned over 170,000 miles. My
I saw
truck is
that. Yeah,
my truck is a 1995 F250, and that just turned over 175,000 miles. I really wanted to buy a new car here recently, and I had a Nissan dealership quote me out a Versa off the lot. The absolute base manual base model version was $19,985. I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to do it because I was going to pay cash for it because I don't finance vehicles. But anyway, I apologize. I just had to put that in there. Nissan is
no,
no longer an affordable car brand.
no. I mean, you're right. And so I see the younger folks. They'll say, "I really want a house, Jason. We'll go out and look," and it'll be they they want something move-in ready. And I'll first thing always ask them, if any home buyer at all is like in a budget price range, first thing I always ask them is, "Hey, are you willing to do some work?" What I mean by that is, I know you're FHA, so we got to have the house to a certain level, but that doesn't mean you have to have a new kitchen. It just means the house has to be safe and sound, for FHA guidelines. So, like, are you willing to do some work, on the weekends or at night in order to do the upgrades over a period of time to create the house that you really want? And 9 times out of 10, they tell me no. They tell me, "Oh, we really don't have time for that," or, "Man, we really don't wanna involve ourselves in some kinda construction project," or whatever. And those people, sometimes they go ahead and end up buying a house, and I help them buy one, and they find something, but 9 times out of 10, I can tell that they feel like they're overpaying, and it's stretching them to the absolute limit of their budget, or they end up not finding anything, and they end up just kinda putting their head down and walking away and going, "Well, the market's too expensive for me, I guess." And it's like, n it's I right now, in my opinion, it's a great time to find a deal because there are a lot of sellers right now that need to sell. And I don't know that all the sellers have got the message that the market's changed, but eventually they will. And when that happens, if prices go down, you may have more competition. So it's like, hey, go out, find a house that maybe has been on the market that's beat up, negotiate with the seller, make an offer that is offensive, and see if you can create some value and have a longer term vision than just moving in the next 3 months or the next month to be ready for Christmas. Like, take your time, find a deal, find an opportunity, and put your energy into the hunt instead of just saying, "Well, I'm just going to go on the MLS and find what everybody else is doing and then complain because house prices are too high or institutional investors own all the market share." Institutional investors aren't going to buy a fixer upper. They're just not going to. So you're
Sure.
not going to compete with them. In an
So
1850 house, I don't think an institutional investor like Open Door is going to buy it.
no, not at all. The the other thing that you just made me think of is when I was in the process of getting out of debt after I had over $25,000 in high interest credit card debt that I paid off. I had a car that I had to pay off. I also had a bunch of student loans that I had to pay off. In total, it was $80,000, and I paid that off very quickly. And when I was doing that, I used the Dave Ramsey method that I highly recommend it for people who feel like they don't actually have a hold of their paychecks. They're living paycheck to paycheck. He's for you. Some of the other more advanced stuff, not so much, but he is for you if you can't control your spending. But all of that to say, when I was getting out of debt, it taught me the hard way to think about dollars in a different sense as units of time. Because if I didn't have X amount of dollars in the bank, could I trade that reality of not having X amount of dollars for maybe a skills equity that I need to skill up on something like plumbing or electrical work, or refine my, hanging and finishing, or be willing to demo out a house yourself and just carry a bunch of really heavy trash bags of plaster out the front door and into the back of your truck, which, by the way, my truck was $5,000. It was not a brand new $40,000 F-250. I really did this with all cash. And I had to redefine what value actually meant to me, because I look at real estate listings now and I see one that is $125,000 for an 800 square foot, 2 bed, 1 bath. It would be a perfect place for a single person in a decent neighborhood or out in the country. It's got the old carpet, like this place. It had old carpet. I ripped that out, and I found Pergo on sale from Lowe's for $1.99 a square foot. And I installed that myself over the course of 4 days, and I was done. And it looks gangbusters. It's phenomenal. Some paint, if the walls aren't falling in, which the threshold of heavy repairs versus just throwing up some paint and changing the floors, I've found, especially in my part of the state of Ohio, rural Ohio, is about $100,000. If you're going below $100,000, it is down to the studs, total rehabs, and you need either a significant amount of cash to be able to hire good contractors that you know well, or you need the skills yourself to be able to do that work. Don't necessarily recommend that for everybody, but you have to think about, I know that a lot of people they're convinced they have to live in major metro areas, or they have to live on the coasts, and they have to live in certain neighborhoods within that major metro area to get the right schools or whatever it is. Or if you're a single person, a lot of people keep getting the one narrative that I keep hearing that I really bothers me is that single people shouldn't own real estate because you're going to move all these other times in your life. I disagree. You should be pretty much set by age 30 of where you really kind of want to live for the rest of your life. If you want to do the overseas thing, do it in your early 20s. If you are like post-divorce and single, that's a different conversation. I don't have that life experience myself, but I mean, I'm 36. So mid to late 30s, I know I'm pretty much going to be here for the long haul because my parents live 20 minutes away and my brother lives 20 minutes the other direction. And this is where most of my extended family is as well. My kin have been here since the 1860s. So I'd prefer to stay in Miami County. A lot of people they don't feel grounded and rooted in their family history, for one. And they also don't feel grounded or rooted in a specific community because we were all told to leave our hometowns when we were kids in the 90s. And we go to college and then we get told we only can find a job if we stay in Columbus or New York or Atlanta or LA. That's simply not true. I made 136K last year gross, and it was all from my home office and some contracting gigs here in town. So and by the way, it was all Ohio money because the corporation I work for is based in Ohio. So don't give me this excuse that you have to live in Illinois to make a high salary. That's my thoughts on the matter.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. Yeah, it's I watched one of your, and by the way, folks, you got to check out Raymond's channel, but he posted a video a couple days ago about Gen Z and millennials, and and he highlighted an article from Fortune magazine, I think, about some of these excuses that we hear people making, and it was actually an article that kind of was more or less, in my opinion, kind of coddling that narrative versus saying, "Hey, there are a lot of ways to buy real estate and get involved." And by the way, you don't have to own a home in order to be successful. That you don't have to. It's not a requirement to own a home to live. But if you want to own a home, there's a lot of ways to do it. And one of your videos highlights that, or that video on Gen Z and millennials and buying a house highlights that, the typical narrative of, "Hey, I gotta go to finish high school, go to my 4-year college, probably either have parents pay for college or go in debt for college,
Mm.
and then come out and get a job in," I think you said, if I remember right, it was classic, it was HR, marketing. Yeah, I thought, "Holy cow, what?" That is exactly what, and I'm older than you, I'm 47, but I heard that growing up, and you get those little memos about what people are doing after high school, right? Like, "Hey, I'm gonna be going to Ohio State, and then I'm gonna major in business, and I'm gonna get a job in downtown Columbus," or something. And it's like, there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat now. I just heard today 36 million people are actually full-time content creators, and that's how they earn a living. And it was something like 110, was it 36 million uh make it of their full-time job, and around the world it was something like 150 million. There are a lot of ways to make money now in the new economy. There's a lot of ways to do things. The internet and the way you can find houses now, like you did on Zillow, there's opportunities to find houses that aren't listed. I mean, most of the properties I buy for investments are not listed. In fact, I haven't bought a house or a property that's been listed on the MLS now for 4 years. Everything I buy now is either um, through direct marketing, or it's because, and usually because I'm out hunting and I find a house that I'm like, "I wonder what's going on with that property," and then I call the owner or send them a letter and knock on a door, and you do it a lot. You get a lot of no's, "Go away, leave me alone, lose my number." But you do get people that are like, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about selling. I probably do need to sell this thing, and let's talk." And so I think there's just a lot of ways to do it, and it's the conventional 4-year college, corporate job, invest in my 401k, get married, go into debt, buy the Gladiator, and then retire is maybe not the way that everybody should go if they want. What the traditional way is killing them or depressing them, right?
Well,
Figure out another way to do it.
just simply look at how wages have tracked against the value of the dollar over the last 50 years since 1971. If even in the last 5 years, since 2019, if you didn't get more than a 10% a year pay raise, you took a pay decrease. And no one got a 10% per year pay raise over the last 5 years. Mine was 2.6% this year. I'm supplementing my income with other sources. And I'm actually, one of the reasons I'm doing the YouTube thing is because the W-2 gig, I'm realizing that I'm kind of hitting the ceiling of what I can do as far as age wise without going into middle management. And I have no desire to manage other people. So I'm taking the self-employment 1099 route, and I run my own company. It's called Sycamore Enterprises Limited. I painted a house earlier this year, the neighbor's house of the house next to my rental. She had me paint her house for $5,000. It was $2,500 less than I should have charged for it, but it looks great. It looks great. And she had me painted beige, not red, like I painted my house. But I mean, I have the rental income too, and the YouTube income coming in. And the biggest thing that I talk about as well is keeping your expenses as low as possible. Realistically, my expenses are between $1,800 and $2,200 a month, depending on whether you want to include taxes and insurance, because I pay the property taxes and registration and insurance fees for all my vehicles and my properties in lump sums every year, but they average out to about $400 a month if I split it up in between, to 12 payments. So my base level expenses are $1,800 a month, and that includes an adjustable $600 to $800. So it's $1,800 to $2,000 for food. And I mean, I'm just feeding myself and I'm still spending $600 a month on food. My mortgage for this place is $750. I make a double payment every month with the full rent from my rental on this house. So it's a net basically zero. It's a $750 raise basically on my W-2 income or whatever other income that comes in. But I'm not counting on the W-2 income lasting forever. So my goal is to kind of replace that with rental income, small business income, YouTube income. And it doesn't really take that much to get to that $2,000 a month level.
That's awesome. I mean, man, I'm jealous. That's I mean, I certainly we don't live like kings, but go ahead.
Don't be jealous. Remember what Thomas Sowell said. Not it's there are no solutions, only trade-offs. It's all just about compromises. There's a lot of trade-offs
Yeah,
for my life. There's a lot of things in my life that are not what I wish they were, and there's probably a lot of things about your
sure.
life that I would love to have. That it's all about trade-offs, not
Oops.
solutions. There are no solutions.
So, what I was saying was that the way that you manage your expenses and how you manage the debt payment on your rental property and what you do to make that double payment is really smart. It's amazing how fast your amortization schedule will go down if you make larger payments, especially up front. And I don't think enough people do that. It's something I always tell my clients who are buyers at the closing table. I bring a schedule with me, an amortization schedule. I show it to them, but then I also bring out my phone and show them a calculator on, hey, what happens if you make an extra $100 a month payment to your mortgage? What happens to it? And I show them, and they're like, wow, like that's a huge difference. Well, they do it. I don't know. But again, just the way you manage things with your rental, how you persevered through the doldrums of trying to get it rehabbed yourself, and the also realization that you couldn't sell it, but then you're like, okay, well, I'll just be a landlord then and I'll rent it out. And how you found it and all that wrapped up into it. And then on top of that, starting the YouTube channel, and you're already at 1,100 subscribers. It took me a year to get that. It must be the beard. It's the only thing I can figure. That's my excuse. It's your
If,
beard.
if you go back 2 months, I actually was clean shaven when I first really started putting videos up.
Okay,
This
well,
2 months
I
worth
can't
of
use that.
growth.
Yeah, I can't use that excuse then. So,
But my
um,
the mortgage is actually on the house I'm sitting in now, and it's not on the rental. So just a
well, you
clarification
take
there.
your rental income though and your
Yeah.
profit, and you're not like going, "Hey, I'll put that towards a gladiator." You're like, "No, I'm gonna put this into the other mortgage," and that's smart. That's really smart.
I toyed with the idea of making like $5,000 payments because I only owe 87 on this house, 87,000 because I bought it for 112, and that was another negotiation story that we could tell one day. But it was really under market, and I've got 87 left on it. And I thought about making like $5,600 payments on it and being done in about 15 months. But I also like the idea of having a lot of dry powder, I guess, ready because I don't know what's going to happen with the economy next year. But we
right.
were saying in 2023 going into 2024, and now here we are. What's the stock market up? The stock market's always up, and gold is literally it's $1,000 over what it was this time last year, literally a year ago. I
Yeah.
I bought some in October of 23, and I should have bought a lot more. um, but and for the record, I do not want to buy a Jeep Gladiator. I don't recommend anybody buy Stellantis
Me neither.
product. I owned a Dodge Challenger. It was a fun car, but I sold it before 50,000 miles, so I don't know what the longevity is on those products. An old Toyota is what I like.
Right on. Yep, I agree. Yeah, I finally changed out my 2012 Subaru Legacy when it
That's a great
completely
car.
quit. Yeah, I love Subis and completely quit. And so I
Fine
ended up
SDI.
I have an STI actually. I
Oh,
do.
do you?
I do.
That's
I
great.
do. Yeah. It's
That's the one to get.
I bought it a while back years ago when I had a corporate job and had disposable income at that point. And then yeah, I kept that. That's kind of my little fun car, but then I ended up just buying another Subaru Legacy, and I went out and like you, same story. I could have spent a lot more, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna get another Legacy, a couple years newer than I already had. I drive a ton for real estate, obviously, but it's fine. It works, and I don't need a. There's a lot of realtors that buy like ridiculous cars, like, and I just think it's so. I mean, unless you're only dealing with luxury clients, it's very, in lack of a better term, cheesy.
the
to like do
base
that. It's like,
level the base level Suburban now is like $75,000.
yeah,
And
yeah, they're
then
insane.
most of them get the Cadillac Escalade, which is a $112,000 vehicle. That's how much I paid for the house I'm sitting in on the half acre that I'm sitting on right now. That, oh, by the way, has an 1,100 square foot commercial shop sitting on it too. That's zoned commercial.
Wow. Wow.
I'm there. There are no solutions, only trade offs. And if you make good trade offs, you can have a little bit better of a life. That's
Absolutely.
maybe
Yeah.
the message.
What's that?
I said that's maybe the message.
That yeah, I think so. I think you're right. Well, Raymond, listen, this time was awesome. This was great. I think, yeah, I think that's the message. You definitely have to make the right trade-offs. And I just encourage anybody out there who wants to either, get into anything from real estate to YouTube, sit down and think about, like you said, what can you do with your time that will allow you to um better your life in the future and step outside the box, step into the blue ocean instead of being in a red ocean that's all bloody. Step into a blue ocean where there's opportunity and go, hey, maybe I can buy a duplex, rent out one side, live in one side. Maybe I can buy a quad and rent for 3 units and have positive cash flow. um, and not only that, but maybe even pay my mortgage for myself. I mean, there are ways to do it. It's just takes some ingenuity, it takes some studying and some perseverance. But I think most anybody can do it if they put their mind to it. So I guess that's a good way to end because you are Raymond Thoughts in Mind.
Yeah, come over and check out the channel if you want. We talk about pretty much anything and everything that's going on between my ears. I, I talk about real estate quite a bit, and I talk about my story with real estate quite a bit over there. But I also go into budget and finances and really living below your means. Not minimalism in the trendy way, but minimalism in the frugal way. And on the note
Right.
about the duplex and the fourplex, can't you get an FHA loan as a primary residence up to 4 doors?
Yes. Yeah, you can. That's a great point. You can actually get a 203K loan for
Yep.
FHA as well on that. And um,
Maybe we
you
can
know,
talk about that someday.
yeah, we should. We should talk about that. And that's a huge opportunity out there for people. Because there's a lot of old, at least in Ohio, there's a lot of old duplexes that need help. They need renovated and they're just sitting there. Um, and there's a lot of sellers that are willing to sell them at a discount versus a single family house that's on the MLS and everybody's there at the open house on a Sunday.
Well, the other thing you got to remember too is a lot of these much hated boomers, they are starting to pass and they're not long for this world. Their kids don't want to keep their houses. They want to check and they don't want to do any renovations or upgrades to in order to get the house sold. There's some deals that are going to be coming on the horizon. I firmly believe that.
I agree. I hear all the time, and I hear it on YouTube a lot. Hey, it's not the rate. The price is more important, and the prices are really high. Well, guess what? There are opportunities to make a deal that reduces the price to a 20, 30, 40% discount off of retail. That is
Yeah.
possible. So if you want lower prices, you can go out there and find them. They are available. You just have to do some work.
And full disclosure, the rate I got on my mortgage was 7.97%. So, and it is an
Right.
arm. It's what I could qualify for. So, but I'm making the double payments and I was able to get it was literally 26% below asking, the original asking price.
Yeah, hey man, that was great. I love your ideas and insight. If you want to come up with some ideas too, but we should definitely do this again. Maybe if I don't know if I can come on your channel or not. I'm not inviting myself, but I guess I am.
Oh, that'd be great. I'm going live tonight, but that's really just to fill some time. I have some
Yeah.
it's not really real estate related. I do
No, no,
want
that's
to
all
do
right.
I want to do a real estate live stream where I literally take zip codes from the chat and look in those metro areas to see what I can
Oh,
find and share my process of finding auctions or foreclosures or affordable stuff or off list, for sale by owner kind of stuff and just look at
yeah.
listing. That kind of content gets a lot of views. There's quite a bit of people that do Zillow reactions online, and I think
Oh,
it would
really?
be, yeah, I think it would be interesting to do it from an affordable house, a quote unquote affordable housing perspective. So write that down, and maybe we can do a hour live sometime, and I'll do it on my channel, do it on yours, whatever you want.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's one of the great things about YouTube is there's no shortage of ideas, that's for sure.
Oh, it's funny. I sit down every day and I think I'm not going to have anything to talk about today, and then it's 20 minutes later and I'm going on and on and on.
Yeah. Thanks for the time again, Raymond. We'll be in touch. Yeah, man, we'll talk again. All right.
Thanks, Jason.